Hey everyone, Amanda here for another segment of Behind the Purpose Power Brand, where we explore how to build a powerful brand that matters, creates value for people, and has a positive impact on the world. I'm super stoked today. Joining me is Lindsey Boyle, founder of Circular Citizen and co-project lead for the Canadian phase of the Stuff and Flex 2 research in partnership with Alice Labs. Hey Lindsey, how's it going?
It's great to be here, Amanda. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. So today we're actually going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, innovation, and that's how to actually create those products and services that matter to people and create value. Where do those ideas come from? And I'm excited because we're going to do it through the lens of the Stuff and Flex 2 research, which found that our relationship with stuff is, interestingly enough, changing. And globally, there's a growing desire for all of us to consume better, to be more mindful about the stuff we produce and the stuff we consume. So it's not surprising. But if you want to hear more about the research and findings, you're going to want to listen in to our Circular Economy Mini-Masterclass with Lindsey on the Purpose Power Brand podcast. So for today, Lindsey, let's just dive into these 4 innovation opportunities that are, like, to me, entrepreneurial gold. They're like, if you're an innovation person, they're like catnip. Let's go one by one. You give a high level description of the territory and let's see what products and service ideas bubble up.
Amazing. And I'll just say, I love that you called these market opportunities gold, because really there's so much that goes into them. And you might look at them and think, oh, they're so simple, but their simplicity and their human-centeredness are really what makes them usable and actionable for innovators.
Yeah.
So I think of them as gold as well. And hopefully we can inspire some listeners and viewers to think that way as well.
Fantastic.
Let's start with the first market opportunity, which is called useful stuff. It's the one that's most here and now. It's the one that most people are resonating with in Canada. And it's really the desire to, buy stuff that's going to be in use for a long time. And it's this more mindful kind of approach to thinking about, am I really going to use this enough times and for a long enough period of time that it's worth adding it to my home, being, having something that I have to store, and wanting to not buy things that they don't end up using enough or for a long enough time. That's really the heart of the useful stuff market opportunity. And I think it's fun to think about, well, what fits into that category? What are some things that fit into that?
Yeah. I think share a couple of examples and then maybe that'll get us pinging a little bit.
Absolutely. I think one of them is cast iron pans. We have in the playbook, we feature Lodge cast iron, which is one of the longest standing consumer goods products out there. So you think of it as maybe not necessarily innovative, but it really is in the context of, having something that is going to last for a very long time. And also, in contrast to a lot of non-stick pans that unfortunately their coating on them is just not made to last. So it might be convenient, early days. That is not going to last you years and years. And in fact, that coating non-stick often starts to degrade and, basically means that the pan needs to be thrown away, even if the rest of the pan is built to last. Yeah. So that's one kind of base level example of what innovation that we need more of and that people want to see more of.
Yeah, I see this category being almost going into the 4th territory, the flowing stuff, because if it lasts a long time, then I can start thinking about things like its second life. I can think about things like sharing it. I can think about things like, secondhand stores and those kind of things. Is that also part of the useful stuff sort of territory?
Absolutely. And I think that companies that really get this idea that people want products that last a long time also are thinking about the end of life solution that they can offer to take that product back and give it a second home, or to market the resale value of an item as something that people are thinking about. So maybe I might not use it, for my entire lifetime, but I want something that might actually allow me to resell it to someone who is ready for, a cast iron pan. So that is definitely, I think, a big part of useful stuff too, is how do you help people pass things on when they're done with it, but knowing that the product still has a ton of useful life.
Yeah, it's making me also think about, from a service perspective, because we're starting to think about, and we'll use the language that you're using, the useful stuff, things that I want to keep for a long time. So I'm expecting that they'll be repairable. So whether the brand allows for repair and that sort of that cycle between the product and repair, or whether there's services out there that more and more that have the capability and expertise to repair those items, that could be another value creation opportunity as well.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of naturally taking me to Arc'teryx, who have invested in a whole platform around circularity for their outdoor clothing brand. And they're really, I think, getting this idea that they're with the buyer throughout a really long life.
Yeah.
And that means they have the responsibility to offer what they call recare. So, the repair services, should you need them at any point, we're going to offer you that to keep your, keep that jacket in use.
Yeah.
For as long as it, possibly can be used. And also the re-gear option, which is if you are done with that item and you want to keep it in use, but offer it to somebody else, they have a platform where you can sell your Arc'teryx gear on their platform. So it's really thinking about the relationship that you're going to have with someone who wants to be with you as a brand, over an entire life cycle of a product, and what are ways that you can help them, keep that product in use for as long as possible.
Yeah.
I really love kind of their approach to that.
Yeah, I know, that's really great. So let's go with the next territory.
Yeah, the next territory is stuff connecting to nature. And this is a global study. It was the Stuff in Flux. It was done in 7 countries, and it's just interesting to note that this market opportunity is more significant for Canada than it is in other countries. So Canadians love their nature. They're very connected to the idea of the outdoors, and so it's not surprising, I think, that this came out. But I think for stuff connecting to nature, this is a shift where people, I think, they're demanding more information and more proof that something is actually connecting positively to nature than in the past, where you might just have said, oh, this is a natural product. I want to make that distinction, because I think people are thinking harder about how is something connecting to nature, and what is the impact of how it's produced, and really thinking more about kind of where things come from and how they're grown, and what is the impact on ecosystems and communities in terms of how things are made. So there's that sort of systems aspect going on here. But there's also just like a more visceral want to bring the outside in. So, during the pandemic, green paint colors like really took off, and people wanted to become plant parents more than ever. And so really thinking about nature and the elements of nature being really clearly obvious in our lives, I think that's part of this market opportunity as well.
Yeah, and it's the linear thought to an idea would be buying plants and bringing plants indoors and living wall services and creating those spaces in your homes and in your environments. But then there's this whole other side with that is maybe there's opportunity in service areas that bring people into nature, whether it's getting more attuned to bees and what bees are doing and exploring that environment, to maybe even services that help you start going into your provincial parks and camping, and like, is it that as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just think there's this general realization of how much we need nature.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And wanting to support brands that are aligned in that. And I'll maybe talk a little bit about some examples that we have in the playbook, just to get at the multi-dimensional aspect of this market opportunity. I think bamboo as a material is a highly renewable material. And knowing that bamboo is being used in compared to a old growth forest, for example, would be really important to to kind of convey. So I know that I'll just kind of call out, I'm not going to call out any specific brands, but there's still a major issue with how virgin old growth forests are being used for toilet paper. Unbelievably, old growth forests are being cut down to make toilet paper. You would think we could find a replacement, and bamboo would be a natural material to take that place. And companies like IKEA are really showing what are all the different ways that we can put bamboo at the forefront of consumer products, and both kind of enjoy the the kind of the benefits of that material in terms of seeing the grain in it, seeing the strength of it, feeling connected to something that has good energy, because if you dig into it even a little bit, that something that is regenerating so quickly the way bamboo is not harming ecosystems that we desperately need, and biodiversity that we desperately need. So I just kind of applaud IKEA for really looking at their supply chain and thinking about how do we innovate using materials that have these very strong environmental benefits, but also benefits for people. Like, it looks beautiful, in the way that it's being used in their products. So it is just this win-win if you start getting creative with how do you connect people with nature, and how do you tell the story of nature through a product.
Yeah, it sounds like it's, there's opportunity to reacquaint ourselves with the nature. So whether that's an environmental and creating our spaces so that they're infused more with nature, but also being cognizant of the materials the resources that we're using from nature, and doing it in perhaps a more regenerative way, or leaning towards more of those regenerative materials that are not harmful to the environment, that are not harmful to the earth, that are more sustainable, that are more regenerative. But it's interesting because I think that there's this particular space has a lot of opportunity from a material from a material perspective, like what are the materials that we're using? But are there any other services that you've seen that could be examples in this area of the reconnecting with nature?
I don't want to sidestep your question, Amanda, but the one that's coming up for me is linked to a product.
Yeah.
But I will hopefully maybe paint the opportunity here. So Nutshell Coolers is one of the other brands that we feature in the podcast. And I had the pleasure of working with David Cutler, the CEO, who really told the story of the way that they're developing their materials for their drinks coolers. It's just like, a cooler you would use to cool your drinks, and that would be portable. You'd take it on a summer day. And they've created the insulation for that cooler from upcycled coconut husks. And so he talks about how the practice of sourcing that upcycled coconut husk comes from the Philippines. They pay farmers for what would otherwise be waste. So they're creating this positive connection to nature and to communities, which is part of this innovation territory, by giving them a revenue stream, giving the farmers a revenue stream that they wouldn't otherwise have, and gaining this really, really high performance material, which they're finding is awesome to keep drinks cold. So they've done side-by-side comparisons versus other coolers, and it keeps the drinks cold for 48 hours. Like the ice stays frozen for 48 hours. Yeah. So highly efficacious, and that's sometimes a concern for people with new innovations. Like, well, does it really work? And in this case, they can stand by their product and say it really does work. But what he said is that they're really thinking of themselves as a materials innovation company. They have the cooler. It's a kind of a great signature. It's a great kind of entry point for people to learn about Nutshell Coolers. But they have this whole strategy beyond that for where else can this high performance coconut husk material, how else can it be used? And how else can they kind of help it get out there in the world? And they're really looking at it for things like the built environment, or, insulation, or, contributing to the supply chains of many other consumer goods companies. So that's, I feel like, the bigger picture that I wanted to get across with, if you can find a really good natural material and prove that it works really well, it performs really well, I think this is a really exciting moment for companies to supply other companies that are trying to figure these things out themselves.
Yeah, I don't want to jump ahead, but when you talk about upcycling, it really does bring me to that place of, think about all aspects of your product life cycle chain, the actual stage of it, and all the different stages, and what can be done in that life cycle management through all of those stages, including the end of life. Like, we have a lot of companies out here now that provide the service of, picking up the waste. But what happens to that waste? Can that waste be used for something? Or what is considered waste, like these coconut husks, could they become something else? It's a really interesting notion of where value creation can actually start. And it opens up so many different opportunities. So that's a good one. Okay, let's talk about the third territory.
Yeah, the third territory is called joyful stuff.
I think this was my favorite.
Well, I think in the world of circular innovation, for me, it just, again, reminds ourselves that we're innovating for people, and joy is really important. And joy was really lacking from our lives, through the last few years with the pandemic. And so the question becomes, how do we meet that need for joy without feeling guilt?
Yes.
Of, that, disposable or kind of throwaway culture of, I'm going to buy something that makes me feel happy. But then it's actually not responsibly produced, and it's creating harm through the way it's produced, or I'm only using it for like a really short time, like a balloon or a glow stick. And so that's where I really just have to start with the Nyoka Labs example in our playbook. They have created this glow stick called the Lumi, and it was inspired by the natural phosphorescence reaction that occurs in nature. And they found a way to make this glow occur naturally in a rechargeable glow stick. And so you can have that fun at parties, at camp, when you're camping, for your kids, without the feeling of like, I've purchased something that is fleeting joy, but significant harm, both in terms of the toxic ingredients that a traditional glow stick would be used with, but also like, where does it go? Where does that go once it's done? Like you're literally, it's stopped glowing, and now it's, your kids are done with it. It's got to go in the trash. And also, materials, like it represents not a very joyful experience if that glow stick bursts and ends up in your children's eye, which is a real story. It happened to my neighbor's son. So this is the opportunity, is if we can find a way to recreate some of these single use or toxic products that are used to create joy, but recreate them in a way that, doesn't have those downsides. I feel like there's a whole area for physical product innovation, but this is also a real potential area for, digital innovation, or digital fashion. There's this whole kind of opportunity for our joy to come not from a physical product, but from something that you can experience virtually. We kind of talk about like, what if Christmas trees, for some people could be replaced with like a really cool hologram, that is beautiful and festive, but doesn't require plastic materials that are toxic and really hard to recycle being introduced to the environment. So it's sort of maybe the most materialistic market opportunity, but also the one with the most kind of creative and innovative ways that joy could be delivered for people.
Yeah, and it also makes me think tangentially as well when you're thinking about toys. So simple, we all complain about toy packaging. Like it is the bane of every parent's existence is toy packaging. But this could be a real space for, packaging that is compostable, packaging that when you can plant it in the earth and it becomes flowers. Like we're already seeing that in envelopes. We're seeing it in paper products. So why couldn't you do sort of that lateral move and say, well, this is not just packaging for Barbie, not to use Mattel or throw them under the bus, but it's actually something that grows a garden as well. So I think there's a real big opportunity here to not just think about the actual physical product, but the packaging of the product, the way the product is delivered, and how could that also bring joy, which would make that consumption of the product, you feel good about that. You feel good that I'm enjoying the product, but I'm also enjoying the fact that its packaging is not, piling up in some trash heap somewhere.
I'm going to build on that in terms of kids and toys, because one of the examples we have in the playbook is toys as a service provided by a local Vancouver brand called the Toy Share Experience. And this is for quite young children, age 1 to 5.
Yeah.
And they're really building on, the very true insight anyone who has little kids knows is that the toy that is most played with is the one that has been just introduced. And the other ones that have been around for even a few weeks, like, aren't getting playtime. And so they talk about how the joy of a new toy is, really a meaningful part of the way that kids develop, and keeping those novel kind of interactions with toys is really aligned with their service, because
Yeah.
they rent toys. And when your child has kind of hit the point where they're like not that interested anymore, you can change it up and you don't have to store it. Homes are getting smaller, people have less space, they don't want clutter in their homes, but there's this tension with, how do I kind of developmentally keep up with my kids' needs for joy and learning through toys? And so this is kind of a perfect one, which bridges both the joyful stuff and the next one, which is the flowing stuff, in a solution that really matches the human childhood development process that is so it's so important to parents to provide.
Yeah. And there's always going to be this an element of joy that comes from the new, right?
Yes.
The shiny new car, the shiny new, piece of apparel, whatever the new
Yeah.
is. And this category and the next one really challenge this idea of, well, do you need to own it? Can you share it? Can you borrow it? So without getting too much into it, why don't you take us to the fourth territory?
I will, because I think, this is especially important for brands that are looking to really figure out, how do we stay relevant with Gen Z, because this territory, flowing stuff, is one that is increasingly more compelling the younger, the younger we go. So millennials, in particular, but also very much for Gen Z, they don't have this need for ownership the way older generations do. And they are asking the hard questions of, like, well, where does this come from and where is it going to go?
Yeah.
That idea of, like, there is no way. And so I think if you are looking to innovate for younger generations, this is a really, really exciting space. And I'll just say, it doesn't necessarily also have to be that you're providing the stuff. This applies to innovators that are potentially providing tech that enables people to to use things and then pass them on. And I'll raise a great example, which is a startup, but I predict big things for what's called Disco. And it's a Chrome plugin, which literally helps you, if you're looking for a very specific new item, say a Patagonia jacket or Athleta leggings, it will literally pop up and it will show you all of the listings that it can find and curate on the internet, that so you can buy something secondhand that is specifically the item that you were searching for new.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
so it allows us, and this is really the circular economy. Like, we're really talking about the circular economy now, all of the innovation territories linked to circular solutions, but flowing stuff is the way people think of the circular economy.
Yeah.
It's the way that participants in the research talked about it. It's like, I want stuff to flow. I want stuff to I want to use it, but then I want to pass it on, and I don't necessarily want to own it. And so flowing stuff is really just the human-centered way of thinking about the circular economy. It's how people talk about it. So Disco just really helps solve that increasing tension with buying new things, and enables people to find exactly what they want to look for. Because sometimes I want exactly this jacket. I don't want to have to go to a thrift store and search through many, many, many jackets to find the exact one I want. That's a real problem. And this disco really solves that problem to circular clothing by saying, I can help you find exactly what you're looking for. And here's all the different listings for you to choose from. So that's just a really great tech enablement example of which I think innovators will have, infinite opportunity to help people connect to stuff that is pre-owned and people want to give it a second life.
Yeah. It's making me think of upcycling. Anything upcycling would follow in this territory as well. So whether it's the coconut husks or whether it's food that is upcycled. There's so many different areas. Tires upcycled into fashion accessories. There's so many places that you can play here. Any other examples that you would share, that any of your favorite examples? It doesn't have to be in any of the particular territories.
Well, I think, second life electronics is something I really want to talk about, because I really think that, there is just some incredible opportunities for people to buy second life electronics. And I just want to give a shout out to, in Canada, we have Mobile Clinic, which is owned by TELUS, as a genuine solution to buying a new iPhone, iPad, computer, laptop. But also there's other websites that are selling second life electronics. One's called Refurb Me. One is called Back Market that I've just heard of. And I think that it's really important for people to kind of know and feel secure that second life doesn't mean that you're taking you're downgrading the performance of those electronics. And I think something I've learned about working in this space is that a new electronic gadget is very likely to have been produced mostly with automation. In the manufacturing process. There's not a lot of human attention to how those new products are put together. But if you're buying from somewhere like Mobile Clinic, a human has to certify it as pre-owned certified. And you still get a warranty. And a person has looked at that and said, all of this is working the way it should be working. And so I think that's just really important in this space as we think about, second hand doesn't have to mean a sacrifice on performance. There's going to be almost even benefits to buying flowing stuff that we're going to get better and better at communicating, which means that more and more people are not going to have reasons not to go this way. I think, I'm afraid that something's not going to work as well, or I'm afraid I'm not going to get a warranty, might have historically been barriers for people. Right. I think there's going to be more and more storytelling and communications that will get these benefits out, so people understand, well, there's actually really no downside. Yeah. To kind of supporting the circular economy, or to kind of going to something that's flowing, between me and then passing it on to Amanda or passing it on to the next person, and sort of those kind of cognitive barriers that people might have, I think are increasingly going to be overcome with the way that we talk about flowing stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's just so much richness, I think, in each of the territories, each of the market opportunities. I think that whether you're running a hair care product line or whether you are, in banking, I think each of those territories present different stretch goals and different stretch opportunities for your business that you can start to ask the question, well, how can I infuse more connectivity to nature, whether it's in my workplace, whether it's in my products? And you can almost use it, well, as an innovation matrix. They're really springboards for ideation. I just love that about the playbook. And I know that we could just keep going and going. So I'm going to just say thank you. And I want to say, how do people get that innovation playbook? I think I can put the link in the show notes or things like that, but is there other call outs that you want to make?
A link in the show notes would be fantastic. You can go to the Share, Reuse, Repair Initiative website, and under innovation, you will find Stuff in Flux and the link to download the playbook for free. We want people to use it. We want people to include it in their innovation processes this year to start impacting innovation in 2024. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity to talk about it, and we just really want people to use it. And they can also reach out to me if they want help applying it to their business.
Oh, that's awesome. Lindsey, thanks so much for joining me behind the Purpose Powered Brand. Bye for now.